console room. Motor's still on the dyno. We're going to take a walk out there and take a look at it. It is the 3800 V6 saga continued. Today we were able to run the air-to-water intercooler from ZZ Performance, and actually it did very well. So it will be an interesting comparison. I'm going to be putting that, working on that video tonight, and it'll be up tomorrow morning. And it'll be an interesting comparison for a lot of guys to be able to compare what happened when we ran the water meth injection on this same motor and when we ran the air-to-water intercooler, because both of them obviously cool the charge. And you'll be happy to know, as a spoiler alert, yes, the intercooler does in fact work. It actually cools the charger quite well, and as we saw this. And not only that, and we'll go over all of this in the video, but the very cool thing, and this is kind of typical with intercoolers, is that it makes the combination a lot more consistent. And as we saw, and if you've watched any of these 3800 videos, if you haven't, take a look. I have a whole playlist for 3800 stuff. There's lots of them there. And one thing we notice with these root superchargers is they're not terribly efficient. They heat up the air quite a bit. The other thing that they do is, although it has a bypass valve, which helps recirculate the air and it helps cool it off during cruise, it takes a while for that to happen. So if you make successive runs, what happens when you don't have an intercooler is the charge temperature, the starting charge temperature goes up, and that means the ending charge temperature, even though you're only running the same amount of boost, and it should heat up the charge air that much. It seems like it heats it up that much. Excuse me, from whatever starting point it is. So it's an interesting thing. When we put the intercooler on there, all of a sudden that goes away. There's no more of it heating up the air, really. I mean, we see an increase in charge temperature, but the starting point always returns back to the starting point. So it's nice and consistent, which is what you want. And it obviously makes dyno testing and repeatability a lot better. But it also makes it better on you if you're, for racing around and stuff, and you need to get on and off the throttle a bunch. And having an intercooler on there means when you get back on, it's going to be nice and cool. So we were able to run the intercooler. I actually did a lot of tests today, a lot of cool things. And these are all going to be videos, but I ran the thing, in addition to the intercooler, I ran the motor NA again. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted to compare what happened with the cam that we currently have in there. We have the comp 510, 210, 220, and 115. We have that camshaft in there, and we ran it previously. We've compared it what the stock cam did with this cam under boost. Now, after running the NA thing again with the hollowed out basically blower, we got rid of the blower rotor pack in there and ran that again. Now running it NA, I have the stock cam NA and I have this cam NA. So now we have a good comparison of the camshaft, what it did both NA and under boost. So it was some really pretty cool stuff. Also, hopefully you guys have already watched the video on the Nitrous, and let me know what you guys think about that, because the Nitrous stuff was very cool. First of all, it made a lot of power. I mean, it made 565 horsepower at the peak, dropped back down to about 530, which is a good amount for one of these motors. And we ran Nitrous on top of the thing already having the cam and the 3-inch pulley, which is a pretty small pulley, and the long tube headers. And it did very well. I mean, we made a lot of power. We went from 400 about to, like I said, 530. And that would be a fairly serious, motor out on the street. You could definitely spin the tires with that. That would be fairly easy. The interesting thing, though, when we ran the Nitrous, and I'm hoping that a lot of guys commented about this, is that, because I get this all the time, whenever I run Nitrous on anything, oh, you need to run Nitrous on it, especially a wet fogger, and especially with the 85 like we have, because it's going to cool the charge temperature. Well, yes and no. It did offer a little bit of cooling, but not really very much. I mean, as we saw in the video, we only dropped the charge temperature by about 12 degrees, which is not really what I call intercooling. I mean, with the intercooler, we're dropping at like 100 degrees, and that's kind of typically what we see. And that's not to say that wouldn't be even more than that if we had more charge temperature to begin with, which we will, because while I'm down here, I'm also going to do the turbo stuff. So the other cool test that I did, thumbs up on the Nitrous video, cool. The other cool test that I did is and I'll take you out there and show you exactly what I'm talking about. This is kind of cool stuff. So right now I'm putting yet another camshaft in this thing because I've got the bigger cam. I've got the 220, 230 cam. So I just am finishing that, but I want to show you what happens when you're trying to hurry and get it all done. So you'll notice I already have the new cam in. I installed the new cam, put the cam retaining plate, all that stuff on, put the front cover on, and then I looked right down here and saw this. Yeah, that's the timing chain tensioner that's not on there. So now I got to take the front cover back off and put the tensioner on because, you know, that's what happens. Everybody makes mistakes. But at least I caught it before we tried to run it because there's a lot of slop in that timing chain because it's the old factory one. And you can see we've got the lifters out of this thing. So we can do the cam swap and then I can put all that back in. We have this particular one has, these are LS3 springs. LS3, LS6, they're the blue springs, like the 550 lift springs. And that's a good spring upgrade for this kind of camshaft. This cam actually has slightly less lift than the cam that came out of it. Here are the specs on the cam that just went in. Get rid of that light so you can kind of see that a little better. Not working very well. I'm trying to get a good angle here. I think it's not focusing very well, is it? Anyway, it's a 507 lift, 220, 230 at 50, and 112-degree lobe separation angle. So that'll be interesting. I'm going to try to clean this off a little bit here, see what we got going on. I think we got some some greasy fingerprints or something on there. Yeah, so I got to put all the rest of this stuff, you know, back on there, get it running. We ran the blower, and then I also ran. Here's my NA intake manifold that we did, and that's kind of what I wanted to show you. So this is the NA intake manifold, basically just a hogged out blower. But I did something cool. I did a test where I ran it stock, the way that it was, and then as you can see, did a little fancy porting. And by porting, I mean I took the WYSI wheel to it and cut out this section. Let's see if I still have that piece over here. I think I do. Oh yeah, here it is. So I cut out the flying V out of the middle of that. What I wanted to find out is, I wasn't looking to port it and make it smooth and shiny and all that stuff. What I wanted to find out is, was that opening shape and stuff, was it restricting what was happening when I was running this thing NA? Was there any more power to be had from doing the NA test? And you can see when we cut the little V section out, you can kind of see what it looks like now. And again, it's not port matched, but it would tell me what I wanted to do is take the big thing out. So we took out a big restriction, changed the shape of the orifice. Obviously, it's big enough to where it flows a ton. And so that should limit, you know, any sort of airflow restriction. So what I'm going to do now is just we put this other camshaft in, I'm going to run that NA and see what the gain is. And I'm also going to run it with boost and see what the gain is, and that hopefully that will take us even higher. And then after that camshaft, then I will run the ported heads. And then we should be getting somewhere. But I'm also going to go over, maybe tomorrow, and go over and get some of the other NA intake manifolds, because I honestly don't think that this intake manifold, this one that we have where we're using the lower intake manifold of the blower and then putting that hogged out, the remove the rotor pack kind of thing, it works obviously, but what I wanted to see is how much better the factory style front wheel drive and rear wheel drive intake manifolds work. They've got much more rudder length than this thing, and so they should have a lot better average power production. It'll be interesting to see what they do out on the top, especially now that we have a cam in it. We're revving it all the way out to 6,000 RPM. Actually, I think we were making our runs. Well, with the blower, we were running out to 6,300. So, and then again, we'll run it under boost, and I've got that other smaller pulley. I've got new lifters for it too. The lifters that are out there, they're pretty worn. They're looking pretty shiny. They're still working, and so I'm just gonna keep running them. I may put the new lifters in when I put the final camshaft in, because we'll put I still want to go bigger on the camshaft. So we'll put a bigger camshaft in. I've got the 26-918 springs, and we'll put those on the ported heads. And we'll just see where we are. When we first started, this thing made, I think the NA motor made like 215 with the stock cam and this blower kind of intake when we ran it NA. And so it was down, you know, probably about 100 horsepower to the supercharged version, depending on what boost level we had down, whether we were running on the E85. Maybe not quite that much. I think we were close to 300 or something when we ran it in stock configuration. So, been very busy doing lots of testing today. We ran more nitrous stuff. I ran nitrous on the NA motor as well as and you saw the video on nitrous on the supercharged version, and that worked out really well. I also ran it NA with the same shot to see, so I could do a comparison between the NA stuff with nitrous and the boosted stuff with nitrous, but also so I could compare it. You know, could you take an NA motor and just run nitrous on it and get what you get from the blower upgrade? Because from putting a blower on it, because there's lots of NA 3800s, and those guys want to know what to do. Obviously, a top swap is a very popular thing, but as an option to that, would nitrous get you to where the blower does? You know, so it's lots of cool stuff. So hopefully we'll have even more data, and sometime this week we should have turbo stuff. I want to run the turbo stuff after we put the naturally aspirated intake manifolds on, and I do a series of tests with those. There should be some, you know, good power with that, and then when we run the turbo, especially if we get more low speed and mid-range torque, which I think is a possibility. And that will come into play even more so, I think, when we have this camshaft in. Because this camshaft is going up another 10 degrees. We already saw a slight loss in low-speed power from this 210 camshaft compared to the stock one. There's a little bit of a loss down low. I expect there to be more with the camshaft that's currently going in, because it's you know, essentially 10 degrees bigger than what we have. So I don't see why that's not going to lose low-speed power. The thing that's going to help it is it does have a tighter LSA, so that might help us a little bit. I still expect there to be a low-speed loss, and if there is with this cam, having the long runner manifold, will definitely you know, improve torque production, and especially with the turbo, improve boost response. Let's see, run two GT40s into a 1071. That's why only a 1071. And why GT45s? Why not S475s into a 1471? Although I think a 1471 will support a lot. Would you recommend using a ridge reamer or a hone? Just take it to a store or take it to a shop. I've used a ridge reamer in the past in my driveway. Well, my dad did and showed me how to use it. But you shouldn't need to do that with any LS motor. That's only going to be some sort of small block deal, and it's only going to be an older small block too, because the new ones probably have more nickel content or something in them, and they don't seem to wear as much. Can you put a 469 cam in with a turbo? Yes, you can. Have you ever had any issues with Delphi LS7 lifters? I don't ever remember trying them, honestly, so I don't know. If you need a ridge reamer, it's already pre-bored, obviously. Yeah, those blowers are pretty big. Cannot get the HT45 that you have. They're unavailable. You mean the GT45? The GT45 should be available from a lot of places. Yes, everybody hit the like button. Electromotor division makes the trains. Those are as big as trains. Would you change the stock LM7 timing chain to an LS2? We run the stock LM7 stuff a lot, and I don't put the little guide or the tensioner from the LS3 on it. Have I seen Gail Bank's new video? I don't think I have. Can you do a test with all the cheap lifters in the future? That's not going to tell you anything, because really that's going to be more of a longevity deal. Like button being smashed by a Kiwi, that's what we like to hear. You know, it's universal. It's all around the world. There are lots of GT40s. If you search GT45 on the internet, like about 100 of them are going to come up. Have you done much two-stroke stuff? I had a GoPed. We did some stuff to that. And I do have a two-stroke right now. I have a DT125. But I haven't done really any mods to it, though. What's the engine you're testing going into? Nothing. It's planned to be destroyed. We're going to do a big bang on it. Any idea when there might be a sloppy cam? I'm hoping to test it while I'm down here. Dan said when the nitrous didn't cool the charge, you just need to run more nitrous, I guess. Karen, do you prefer undersquare or oversquared motors? I honestly don't care. I just want a motor. Nitrous two-stroke GoPed. What we did on the GoPed is we put a pipe on it. And then we put an inductive pickup on it to find out how much RPM it was running so that we could log it. And we just did a maximum like engine speed test with and without the pipe. And with the pipe, it picked up a lot. It probably picked up 500 or 600 RPM. I still have a GoPed too. They're fun to ride around. Yeah, should I upgrade the valve springs on my LS3? Yes. Wasn't the 3800 where Dan's question was, wasn't the 3800 the one where the aftermarket headers didn't do anything over the factory headers? That's true. And I'm going to run that test again at a higher power level. I honestly think we're not going to see anything again. And if we don't see anything again, then I'm never going to revisit that test. I'm just going to assume that these headers, front wheel drive style headers, aren't worth any power over the stock stuff. And all of this talk about there needs to be a power log manifold, or the front one's really restrictive, or the back one's really restrictive, or whatever the deal is. Because this is like the third or fourth time I've tested this, and if they don't show power again, then I'm going to dismiss it. What I will do, though, I think, is I'd like to try to run rear-wheel drive headers that exit out the back and actually have some length to them. How do you usually pay for these motors? I get at the junkyard. I give them money, and then they give me the motor. I don't know what the question is. What's a good aftermarket lifter for a daily? I don't know. We run all of the junkyard stuff, or I've run stuff from who is it? It's the Felpro company. We've used their stuff. Did you get an Aussie Speed intake? I did get an Aussie Speed intake. I think it's for the Dodge though. Do you know the flow rate of 100 shot? I don't know how to answer that. A 212 218 cam will work good on a turbo application. Aaron, you found a comp cam for the 2.2 liter? I think the guys at Elgin said that they had some too. I'm going to check with them. Have you ever had ever tried an MSD? We've tried all the MSD stuff. Short runner intake on the LS3 on a 408. That'll be a little bit better. $350 for a pair of used complete 799 heads. I don't know if that's a good deal or not. Since we can go get motors for that, we don't ever find 799 heads on them though. 4200 power, yes, we'll be doing some of that too. I've had people tell me I should get a custom spec cam. I don't recommend that unless you're going drag racing. Unvaxxed. I have a low buck. I think I have a low buck dual plane 351 Windsor intake. Send me an email. The MSD grid, we have one here, or Westech has one, but I don't really use it very often. Aaron, you just mailed off your other Magnum core. I know it is time to do the Honda. What's on deck for the 3800? Well, we ran here's a quick update. We ran the Nitrous, we ran intercooler, I ran NA, I ran NA with Nitrous. I did some porting on the NA intake manifold, and now I'm swapping over another camshaft. What's the best budget aftermarket heads for a Gen 6 454? I don't know. There's lots of them out there, but the problem is that the chamber is so small on the factory head, it's going to be hard to get gains. Did you try putting the pistons in backwards? I put them in sideways. Yeah, we're definitely going to run a turbo. Probably more than one. Have I ever tested any Flowtech heads? I have not. Richard, would you consider selling the tunes that you have on these motors? No, because I'm not a tuner, and it's only tuned where I'm running it, so not the whole rest of the curve is not effective. I think that some of the small buck Chevy heads work really well. The Enforcer stuff I think probably does, and you know, I've never tested the Skip White stuff or any of those, but maybe those do too. I don't have a bunch of different size air-to-air intercoolers. A big difference between the different eBay GT45 turbos, I think. Place. Sonic turbo, yeah. Yeah, the Enforcers are good. So, and you have 210s, those are good. We like the AFR stuff. Everything that I've put on that's from AFR has worked really well. The 85 will take you pretty far, but it doesn't help cool the charge air, though. The charge air is going to be hot when it goes in. Have you considered upgrading to ZZP ignition coils? We don't need to. We already have LS coils on it. And we know that those will go to 1500. Because we're not using the factory coil pack on the 3800. Dan, we already ran the air-to-water intercooler. I already tested that. Charles, the 862 heads will support a lot of power, even with stock valves. You can put bigger valves in them, port them, and you can get a lot of power from them. CX Racing GT45, Aaron, that's a good one. Let's get some 3800 information flow. Well, I'm doing a lot of testing. I got a lot of data. Did you run a pressure drop across the intercooler core? No, unfortunately I didn't. I didn't even monitor what the change in pressure was with and without the intercooler, unfortunately, because this dyno didn't have the boost hooked up. I was able to log one of the runs on the Holly, but only with the intercooler. I didn't have it without. I don't think it changed it very much if it did with the intercooler. Somebody else may know out there if you've dropped a half a pound or a pound or something. It can't be any more than that. I'm going off of looking at we have a mechanical boost gauge on here too, and I was looking at that. But I may know later on after we run some more tests, data logging. But now that I've swapped the cam, I can't really do that. So I don't have that data. 317s will make power too. It's just low compression with them because they have big chambers. All of the factory LS heads will make good power. Are you interested in testing the Aussie speed manifold when you go back to the 292? Maybe. Tom out at 12 volt sent me a bunch of intake manifolds. I recently sent them back to him though because I just didn't want to be sitting on them. I don't have temperature before and after, Dan. I don't have temperature before and after the core. I mean, I only have temperature when we had it without the core. I'm assuming that it would be the same. If you were told that this 220, 230 cam wouldn't work with a turbo, that's 100% incorrect. Somebody was asking a question by dynamic compression. I don't put a lot of stock in it. I think it can give you an idea, but it's far from absolute. I don't know how the cam performs yet because like I said, I didn't even put the tensioner on yet, so. I'm gonna have to go back and take that off, but it's pretty easy though. The thing is just snug down, so I can just take the front cover back off and put it back on. Is it worth changing the heads on a 6-liter to a 799 243 from a 317? You will pick up power, but it depends on what you're doing. If you're running a turbo, don't change the heads. Snoopy, if you're going to decap the injectors, make sure that you have more than 8, because it's going to take more than 8 for you to get 8 matched ones after you decap them. Single plane or dual plane? For a 4.8, I would run a dual plane. Have you had any problems with the Typhoon intake? I don't think so. But I couldn't read the rest of the question. Yeah, Dan, obviously the cam specs are looking at the opening and closing events is the right way to do it, but a lot of people can't talk about that stuff. Man, these things come by too fast. If you're getting detonation, it's probably they got a little aggressive on the timing. I'm thinking if it's some sort of provided tune. We ran all of this testing, even the NA testing on E85. I don't have a 7.3 Godzilla build, and Brian and Evan are already out covering that stuff, so I'm not going to be able to do what they do. And I have enough other motors to do before that. Boosted Bird, that LV3 I think is going to start out a lot more powerful than this motor is. The NA motor will start out with the blown power output that this one has. The Big Bang Big Block is over in my storage. It needed some D16 large head stud information. So why are you changing the size of the head stud? The heads are ported on the 3800. I don't have them yet. They were supposed to be here today. The Magnum is coming soon. We're going to run the LV3 direct injected. We're going to do that at Brian's. What's your perfect street car? Stock 706 heads work very, very, very well for boost. So do all the other heads. Thoughts on tuned runner length intake designs versus high flow short runners? The runner length is going to determine where the motor is efficient, almost irrespective of flow, because the wave travels up and back, and so it has to travel a certain distance, and that requires time. That's engine speed, and so short runner manifolds will always lose power down low. Do you think a Ford inline six-cylinder has better aftermarket support than a 2.3 liter? No, I don't think it does, because the 2.3 liter, they've been using that in specific roundy-round race classes for a long time. Yeah, the perfect street car is the one that you have. People ask me, and every time I got interviewed on almost anything, they would always ask me, "Oh, well, you're a car guy. What's your favorite car?" I'm like, well, there's not a favorite one. I would pick different cars for different things. That little Chevy Sprint Turbo or the Civic VX, amazing for fuel mileage. And if that's what I was trying to do, those are good choices. If I want to go really, really fast, you know, something else would be different. I would like to have a stock RX-7, a Gen 3. You know, I like lots of different kinds of cars for different things. We have run the Gen 6 454. I normally put head studs in it when we're running boost. I've run them without head studs, and you can do that. If we're running a lot of boost, we take it apart and put rain gap in it at least. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with liking one brand. Like, I understand a guy likes a 69 Camaro over a 69 Boss 302, but that doesn't mean that the other one is bad. You can have your favorite, and I'll sit there and drink with you and talk about your favorite one all day long, just as long as it's not a negative conversation about everything else, that this is the only good thing and everything else is bad. And that applies to anything, any belief system that you have about anything. Everything else out there isn't bad, and that's the way that I apply that to everything in life. Oh, an RX-3, yeah, would definitely be cool. Have you run a straight 6 with a turbo? Yes, we ran the 292 with a turbo on it. The Brawler carburetor is good for a little 289. What's going on with the Nova? I plan on bringing the Nova down here to West Tech. I'm sure that they don't want me to do that, but I'm going to try to finagle my way into doing it too. And I'm going to come down, and it will be running while I'm down here. That's my goal. And it's going to look ugly, and it's going to have lawn chairs in it and stuff, but it's going to run and drive around. The Nova has, and I got a bunch of stuff for it because I had various people send me things for the Nova. I have suspension parts for it and all kinds of stuff. But a lot of the bushings are shot on it. But I think that I have new stuff to put it in. How big of a shop is West Tech? I don't know what the square footage is. I don't get out to the racetracks very much. I would like to. I've been to a lot of road racetracks, but not a lot of drag strip stuff. I can't wait to see my buddy Jimmy's NSX out on the track, and even the chassis dyno before that. The 4200 is the only engine for the Nova. That is really a good one. Runner length isn't the only thing that dictates the effective RPM, but the reflected wave is 100% RPM dependent because it has to travel. It travels at the speed of sound. It has to travel up and back. The length that it travels takes a certain period of time. That means after it leaves and comes back, it takes that period of time, and you know the RPM has gone in a certain RPM range, and so that is the thing. I think if you take and the question always, and this is what your question was, is the question is what happens if we do a big port version of the same long runner? What does it do? It should extend RPM too, but not by a lot, because you're affecting something different. You're not affecting runner length. You're affecting inertial ram, which is one of the other two forms of cylinder filling associated with intake manifold design. The other one is Helmholtz resonance, which has, in my opinion, has little to no effect. How did you start in this industry? Obviously, I've always been a car guy and got into racing and wrote my first story for Turbo Magazine way back. So a long, large runner would be ideal. No, and I don't... You need to size the length of the runner. The size and the length of the runner need to be done for the effective operating range of the motor. For other things too, for because the other thing that happens is the reflected wave is initiated by cam timing. So if you change the cam timing, you are also changing when you initiate that reflected wave. So you can alter with cam timing too. There's a lot going on. Lots of stuff. Have you ever tested E3 Diamond Fire plugs? Don't do that. What's the largest injector that will idle on a 6-liter on E85? Well, if you have E85, that makes the situation better because you're having to use more fuel to idle. I think we have... I don't know what those are. I think that I want to say that they're 150s or something. The long, bigger runner might not be better than the long, smaller diameter runner. It might not be. What do you think about Pedal Master or Banks Commander? I never tested any of those, so I don't know. I don't do a lot of stuff that's in the car. Tried 1700s and it didn't go well. I think that the snake eaters that we put on here, we did it on the LS, and on 1500s we could make that idle, and especially on E85. What's your opinion on the top end kits from Tricklo? They work really well. All the ones that I've tested have worked really well. Do you only run with conventional style spark plugs? No, we've run the precious metal stuff like Denso Iridiums. I ran those in my Bonneville car all the time. And when I've run them on all the Big Bang motors, had Denso Iridium plugs in it too. I think that this one has TR6s in it, but only because I didn't have another set of... I think I would have put 27s probably in this thing. Yeah, the snake eaters, I've used those a lot on the LS stuff, and they work really well, especially on the E85, because you need a lot of fuel flow. I've heard that E85 can be inconsistent. Pump stuff can be, but we're not in a range where that inconsistency causes a problem. Because if it's E50, it still works. E60, it still works. I'm thinking how the cross rams did it because the runner length is longer. That's why they made more low-speed power. And they were dual plenum. They have more throttle opening. They may have bigger. I didn't measure the flow orifice, like the runner port volume, or even a cross section on those. But those were better than the truck manifold, but they're not as good as the fast manifold, though. They probably are better down low. NGK makes good stuff. Denso makes good. I mean, I never had any problem with Denzos. I ran IQ31s driving around in my Civic, so that's a heat range 10, and that's on a 10-to-1, you know, B19 and a half, B20. We have lots of E3s here. We have a bunch of them. Why do racers run E3s? I don't think that they do. I think that they get E3 money, but I don't think that they use those plugs. The Nova's still ongoing. Talk about the sloppy cam. I should be testing it. That Force Performance Turbo that you're asking about is a good choice. Windows XP. Yeah. XP Professional. XP Pro. I got the dark screen. I guess I gotta put some kind of graph up here, right? Yeah, whoop! When are you testing the sloppy cam? I don't know yet. Port cathedrals or pony up for rec ports? It depends on what you're doing. You gotta tell me what you're doing with your combination. What's a good cam for a 408 LS turbo? Yeah, like a stage 2 or stage 3, depending on how much turbo you're using. Somebody made a comment about starting out with cheap plugs and then putting good stuff in, and I do exactly that. If the motor comes from the wrecking yard, I try to run it with the plugs that came from the wrecking yard. They're probably still good, right? And so we start there, and I hope that they're still good and that they still work. But if they don't, then we would replace them. Truck Norris or BTR Stage 2 truck cam. I don't know which one of those would be better. Your sloppy stage 1.5. I don't even know what that is. What's the best cam for boost? I did not release my own cam line. I have some extra ones left over if anybody's interested. The LS7 lifters I think are different, but I've heard of people having problems with them. I can't speak to that professionally though. Are you sharing the information you get from dyno testing anywhere else? Only on Facebook and Instagram. The TrickFlow 225 heads work good. Your 39-pound injector will feed. Take 40 and multiply it by 16, and that will tell you how much power it will support NA. Or 39 and multiply it by 16. Did I make a bad decision buying a Truck Norris cam for a 5.3 twin turbo? No. As long as you're not trying to make 1,000,000 horsepower, it'll be fine. And I still think that cam will do that. Yeah, Rush, I agree. The sloppy stage 2, I think is too big for, I would never put one in an LR4. I would never put one in a 4.8 liter. I would put a stage 1 in there. Solid roller lifters for a standard plastic lifter tray. You mean for an LS? I've never done that. I think I've only ever run solid lifters on one time, and I'm pretty sure they were link bars. The Torker 2 is not a great manifold. You have a 408 and you want to run a 98 millimeter precision on it, you need to talk to some race camshaft guy because it's going to be fairly big. Because a 98 millimeter's got to be more than a 1500 horsepower turbo, right? Is there any difference in response running a 4150 style versus a elbow and a 90? No, I've done a back-to-back. I've done one back-to-back test on that on a single plane manifold, and they made exactly the same power. The best cam. That's a really good name. I wonder who thought of that. Let's see. The springs that came with the heads worked for that camshaft because that was just a 469 cam. Have I ever had a plastic lifter tray failure at high RPM? I've not had one break at high RPM. They don't do that because there's not really load on them. What I find is that they wear out because we run a lot of high mileage stuff. They wear out and allow the lifter to rotate. And if the lifter rotates and you push the lifter up, then that's when you're talking about braking stuff. But the lifter tray has really no, it's not being loaded in any direction. It's just going up and down. So there's really no reason for it to break. But there is a reason for it to wear out because the lifter goes up and down a lot of times. And if you don't change your oil regularly and all that stuff, it gets heat, it gets the whatever the material is gets hot. I have not. The question is, Richard, have you pulled the L67 apart to check ring gap? I have not. I need to though. What lifters you recommend for a turbo build on an LM7? I don't know. Talk to Brian Tooley about that. He might have an idea. I think that he recommends LS7s. Yeah, new lifter trays are cheap insurance, especially if you've got a motor that has 200,000 or 300,000 miles on it. I would like new lifter trays just so that I knew that when I was swapping 10 or 15 camshafts, that when I rotated the cam around, all the lifters would stay in place. Because if you get a Junkyard motor and you're doing cam swaps on it and you rotate the cam around after you've taken everything off and take the rockers, undone the rockers and the push rods and stuff, and you rotate it around and you can feel it go up and you hear the click, 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 and then it drops back down. You're like, oh yeah, that's got some worn out trays. And so new trays solve all that. And I've had one break while I was dyno testing, so it's just not, I've had a lifter rotate and take the lifter and the cam out, and it's not a good deal. I have not built an Olds 403, not to race or just to drive around. Cylinder 2,000, 3,000 over. Did you have a catch cannon for the fuel leaks? We needed a mop. Do you have any videos on intake shootouts? Oh, that's the other one that I'm hoping to do while I'm down here is I'm going to do the Ford intake shootout, a small block Ford. I'm going to run all of the Cobra style manifolds. So we have the GT40, we have the Cobra, we have the SN95 version of that, and then we have the Explorer. So we should be able to run all those on, and I have a 302 that we're going to run all those on. I think LS2 lifters are the same as LS3 lifters, right? I use LS7 lifters on all my 3800s. That's what I got. That's what I bought. Nothing new on the project vehicles right now. I've never tested a Dodge 4.7, and I didn't know that Kenny Bell made those for a 4.7. The best cam will work very well on a turbo application. Is it truck Norris testing time? Yeah, I don't think I would build an Olds 403 to race, but I wouldn't mind doing testing with one. Have you ever put an LS7 intake on an L86? I have not. On your big block 396, it doesn't matter whether you do singles or twins, just size the turbos for the power level that you want. Yeah, isn't the Olds 403, isn't that what they put in the Trans Ams? Wasn't that the 6.6 liter? And then they also had the 400s. I've read the truck Norris cam isn't really a great cam. Who would say that? It's probably the very best cam for the application that it's designed for. That's currently out. A 2.3. I haven't done a 2.3 since way back in the day when I was helping Dave at Tiny Avenger. I haven't asked anybody on the L36 intake, the Aussie version of that. Stage 1 truck cam and a boosted LS2 Corvette. Yep, that'll work. What are the biggest challenges with boosting a high compression engine? Is having enough octane is usually the big thing. I know, I want to get a hold of a Pontiac. I let a 400 slip through my hands, and I should have just went over and got it. It was only $100. And even if it was rusted inside, I should have still got it. And now I'm kicking myself for not having a Pontiac to play with. Bandit car. Have you tested a 1.5 versus a 1.6 exhaust valve on a Vortec head? I have not. I would be much more interested in the intake flow than I would be the exhaust flow. I just bought Matt Apple's new cam. When are you going to test it? Hasn't Matt done that? A guy was offering to donate a 400? A 400 Pontiac? He needs to hit me up. Twin throttle body intake on a D-stroke high revving LS7. I wouldn't de-stroke it. I would keep the stroke the same and then make more average power. Yeah, I'd like to build a Pontiac 400. Man, my phone doesn't last very long. A 7875 turbo on a 5.3 liter, I would put a small cam in it. The octane rating for E85 is actually different. But I think it's about the equivalent of 110 or something. Yeah, it's an iPhone. What's an aggressive turbo cam profile that work with a 408? propane conversion would be cool. I've never done any propane stuff. I only started that one motor up that I have the video on, and I didn't even do it. It was already done. All I did was just go over there and stand behind the camera and take a video of it. I think that the propane stuff is pretty cool though, but I just have never run anything on the dyno like that. A 4.8 liter with a 6 liter crank rods and stock bore. That's just a 5.3. So you should just get a 5.3. Dan, clever. Is that Eric Clapton's version of propane? Yeah, I like that ghost cam that Summit has is good. A small stage 1 cam. When are you testing the sloppy best cam? TSP stage 2, LS6 springs. Yes, that will work. The engine is less prone to detonation at higher engine speeds. How do you determine if a cam is too much? The way that I look at it is, does it idle well? Does it drive? Does it have good low-speed drivability? Does it lose a bunch of power down low? And that's actually a good question, and we can kind of finish off on that because I'm going to have to get going. One of the things that we're going to see on this 3800 is when we put this 210, 220 small comp cam in, we saw a slight loss in power on this 3800. And then now we've gone to a 220, 230 cam, so we've gone up 10 degrees in duration, lift stayed the same. I think we're going to see even more of a loss in power. And when you see a loss in low speed power, that should tell you that's turbo response. That's boost response. That's a direct correlation. If you lose low-speed torque, the turbo will not spool up nearly as well. Assuming that you're at that RPM range where you're trying to spool the turbo. If you're already at 4,500 and the loss was at 2,500, then you got nothing to worry about. But most of us are not. And so if you're trying to spool the turbo in an area where one camshaft has less power than the other, the one that has less power is not going to spool the turbo as well. And then what happens is you get the multiplier effect. So you're losing low speed power from the cam swap, and then now you've lost even more because you didn't spool the turbo. So one combination with the smaller cam and the better turbo may have like 50 or 60 or 100 foot-pounds more torque, mostly because it now has boost where the other one doesn't have boost. So that stuff is important. That's why I always like recommending, and I'm sure you guys get tired of hearing it. I recommend for almost any kind of, especially LS combinations, but small block Fords and big block Chevys and all kinds of things. The bigger the motor is, the more cam you could put in it and not lose the low speed power because you might already have too much down there. But on an LS application, a small cam will get you to 1,000 horsepower without any problem, and it will have better response. So you don't need a stage 2 and 3 and 4 and 8 and 12, whatever guys want to put in their motors, unless you want the thing to not idle well and chop and sound cammy. If you like that, that's good. That's the thing. But you are going to have a trade-off with that when you go that direction. Michigan, snowy. We don't have snow here. 3/4 race cam. Does that mean it's a 3/4 turbo cam too? When I run nitrous on these motors, I don't even ever look at the plugs. I just look at the air fuel curve normally. We know how much timing to take away, and when I do stuff, I don't run it. I don't usually go to the limit other than the Big Bang one, and I went well past the limit apparently on that one. When we run stuff here, if I run 100 shot or 125 or 150 shot or whatever, we know how much timing to take away. The combination's already safe enough. We don't have to look at plugs to know that what we just did was right, because the power curve will actually tell you that. If you have the tune right on your nitrous deal, then the power curve where the thing is under nitrous will kind of mimic what the NA curve is. If it falls off really bad, that means you're probably getting rich at the end, or you're running out of nitrous flow. You know, there are ways we would look at this and go, oh yeah, this is happening, because we've seen it 100 other times. But we don't really need to. You can at the track look at the ground strap, look at the porcelain. Most people read the ground strap. You also would look for specks of detonation, which you don't want to see. That would be bad. Can you do this cooling test on the L67 on 93? I already did it, and we did it on the 85, but it's not going to change on 93, because the charge cooling that you get from the intercooler is still going to be the same, because the boost is going to be the same. You'll just have less timing in it and will make less power in both conditions, but the delta would still be the same. .2, those are good motors. All right, Mike, we'll see you later. There was a question about the 6.2 liter LT motor, and I have done some L86 stuff. It's the same, it's the exact same motor as an LT. It just has a different intake manifold on it. So I have done some of that, and we're going to be doing some more of that with Brian out at Brian Tooley Racing. Somebody keeps asking a question, and it keeps going by too fast about the bore on their thing and whether they should take it and get it honed or not. And I can't see the whole question, so I can't answer it. I've not tried the TKX transmission. I haven't been going to the gym since COVID. I need to. It's 2 or 3 thousandths over. I don't know what you're saying, but it's 2 or 3 thousandths over. What is the piston to wall clearance? That's what I would be concerned with. Measure the piston to wall and tell me what that is. Yeah, $10 a gallon. That's why I like running the 85, and I just go over and get it at the local station over here, and it's a lot less expensive than everything else, and it's, you know, it's a really cheap substitute for race fuel. A big electric train set. Is there a lot of piston rock at the bottom of the cylinders on a 408 LS? I don't know that all of them would be the same, because your piston design would also affect that. You doubled the spring pressure. You're wondering if that will affect timing belt life? I don't know what the V1 versus V2 question was. Do you run flex fuel sensors? No, we don't. I just go get it from the pump and put it in. $5 a gallon for 100. Yeah, that's a lot more expensive. I don't ever have the, I mean, we have the head surface, but I don't remember ever, paralleling them and doing all that stuff. Stock block 408s. We've run lots of those. I have no idea about factory harnesses and drive-by-wire stuff. E60 versus E85, you might not see any difference at all. An engine is less prone to detonate at high RPM. I think we answered that already. Have you ever run moonshine for gas? Yeah, that video's up. We did that back with Brian Tooley back at back in Bardstown. E85 can leave residue in carburetors. We did a video on that with Brule. You shouldn't leave it sit in a tank for a long time either. What's your opinion on tunnel ram with crossover side drafts? The side draft stuff usually are too small for most of the big V8s. In the stage 2 cam test, was it a BTR V1 or V2? I honestly don't know. Super Sniper Stealth Boost and E85. I don't know what that is. If that is that a throttle body injection or something? Is your shop at BTR in Bardstown? I don't have a shop, but Brian Tooley Racing's shop is in Bardstown. We got our moonshine from Bardstown Bourbon, I think. $50mm diesel. A lot of people, they used to sell those a lot back in the 80s. A lot of people like replacing those with replacing their 4-barrel basically with 2 of the side drafts. I don't know what that would do for power. So you're saying we shouldn't run the E85 in the forklift? I do have work to do. Would you say Holly snipers are a good buy? I don't. They use the sniper thing for like 15 or 20 or 1,000 different products, so I don't know which one you're talking about. I didn't use a special tool for the LS front cover. You don't need to. What I do, and this will be the last question, I got to get going. On the front covers for the LSs, what I do is I put the front cover on and just have all the bolts loose, and then I put the dampener on and let the dampener center the front cover, and then I bolt the front cover on, and it doesn't leak when we do that. Because there's no pins, there's no dowels, there's no locating thing. So we let the dampener locate the seal, and then you tighten it. Rear cover is the same way. The rear cover actually is located by the seal and the crank. So, and it's even bigger, and that thing's located positively, really. So we have the installer that we use that, you know, they sell that little plastic piece that comes with your kit, and you put that in the seal, and then you push the whole thing on, and the crankshaft locates the seal, and then you slide that on, and when you slide that on, then you just put all the bolts in and then tighten it down. And all we do is, especially if the motor's flipped over because we haven't put the pan on yet, if we're putting a motor together, if we're just doing it on the dyno, we have to take it off the dyno to do that because it's in the back. But we just make sure that the two bottom edges are level, and then we tighten it. Can you try revving the L67 past 7,000? There's no reason to do that. It's not making any power there. I need a new front seal on my truck. My favorite style piston is probably a flat top because it has really good flame travel. But I don't like those on a big block because it needs dome in it to make power and make compression. I just don't like really high dome stuff. I thought that I said that that was my last question. Outboard motor pistons, or all of the DZ302 is a real good example. That had the biggest dome of all of the small blocks I tested, the 327 and the 350, because as we went up in displacement, we could come down in dome size to get the same compression. And I'm going through that again with a 396 and a 427 and a 454 build. That, Jared, that 500 horsepower NA deal, that video is actually very popular. I'm glad that I did that. I don't know what the Chop Monster cam is, so I can't really comment on what kind of spring you need for it. Supercharged, thank you very much. I have a 69, oh, a 69Z with the DZ302. Those are really nice cars. See, he's throwing some E85 money at me. That's pretty nice. Hawaii's in the house. Okay, guys, I got to get going. Thank you guys all for showing up. I got, tons of dyno testing. As a matter of fact, I have to stop where I am right now in mid-cam swap, basically, and do the other videos on the, which one are we doing now? The intercooler, so I have to talk about the intercooler and all the cooling-y goodness, intercooler-y goodness. That one doesn't roll off the tongue quite as well. And then, I'm doing, I did a lot of testing today, and we'll do even more tomorrow. So I'll have a whole bunch of videos backed up that I need to do. So it's when I get this much done on the dyno, it's hard to keep it all straight, so I have to stop and categorize it and go over my list for each one, make sure I have videos, because everybody wants the videos of the motors running, and so I got to make sure that I do that. And then we saw I got some cool stuff with the NA Nitrous deal, because I aimed the nitrous at the wrong place, and so, it's a lot of fun stuff. Thank you guys all for showing up. I will see you all tomorrow.